Cool. Hair, skin, and nails is integumentary system. Today we are going to peel back the integumentary system, tear the nails out, rip this luscious hair off, and we are going to look at the skeletal system below. Yeah, the skeletal system. And we're going to find out a lot of neat things about the skeletal system. What I want you to bear in mind about the skeletal system that I think is really neat, because we're going to talk about osteoclasts and osteoblasts and all this kind of stuff, and lots of names about things that you should just kind of know. But really what I want you to know is the concept behind the human body that makes it so amazing, since you guys are body workers. The skeletal system is made up of connective tissue, and it is a dynamic system. Your bones change over time based on your lifestyle. Now that's a pretty cool thing. So most of us kind of think of bones as like, I was born with these levers and in my body, these bars of steel, whatever you want to call them, and sure, they grew as I grew, but then they stopped growing and they just stayed there. And really nothing could be further from the truth. The fact is that depending on the type, not even whether you're athletic or not, but the type of athletics you do, your bones are different than people in other sports. Your bones are different from other couch potatoes. Your bones are different from other massage therapists. And not just based on your genetics, based on your lifestyle. Bones literally are not only super, super strong, but they grow strong in directions that you use them. They are dynamic living tissue. And I'm making such a big deal out of this because when we see a skeleton, it's when we're hiking up the mountain and we see, you know, the head of some animal that's died there, you know, a year ago, and we go, that's a skeleton. That's not really a skeleton. Like, I know it is. I get it. That's a skeleton. But a skeleton is a living, breathing thing in your body. We've only seen them dead. So it is not a chalky, bony white thing. Yes, it's white inside your body, but it's actually a lattice network of soft tissue that's filled in with calcium and potassium to make it stronger. It has flex, it's dynamic, it can grow thicker in certain areas, it can grow thicker in certain directions, and it does all sorts of other miraculous things besides just be a structural support for the body. So I just want to kind of frame this discussion with that. It is another one of the adaptable parts of your body, and quite nifty in that sense. Let me share my slide presentation with you today. Okie dokie. All right. You have about 206 bones in your body. That is not true when you are born. Some of the bones in your body don't fully harden and form and congeal until even as late as age 25, especially if you're a male. Women usually around 18. And some of the bones in your body started out as separate bones and then fused together. A really good example of this would be your hip bones. So, hold on, sorry buddy. Your hip bones right here, there's two sides, but each side is actually formed by three bones coming together. You've got the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. And believe it or not, when you're younger, they're not fully formed and they finally completely calcify and create this socket for your hip. But they're actually three separate bones originally. Ilium, ischium, and pubis, and they finally calcify together. So that's an example of something where you had three bones and they became one later in life. Here's another one that's really interesting. That's your coccyx there. But this is your sacrum. One of the reasons your sacrum looks so funky is it used to be separate vertebrae like these, and it fused together. So the sacrum is usually about 4 vertebrae that fuse together eventually and become one solid bone on you. So In childhood, you have something like 300 bones. In adulthood, you have about 206. They actually change. And there are some huge advantages to this as a child. So I want to talk to you kind of about the miracle of Mother Nature, or God, or Gaia, or Darwin, or whatever you're into. Your bones are the levers for your body, right? We all know that, I hope. Bones are the levers for your body. So your bones are these big levers, muscles hook onto them and pull those levers, and that's how I move. That's kind of the robotic way I move. So bones are levers. Well, really good levers are hard. Really good levers are hard. I don't want my forearm to start bending when I'm pulling on it, you know, like a piece of rubber. That's not going to make me very strong. And as an adult, I need to be strong because I might be carrying around a child, for example. I'm now an adult. And so I need to be strong. But as a child, I don't need to be strong. What I need to be is accident proof. And so children tend to be very cartilaginous. A lot of their bones are not fully formed, and they're mostly cartilage, connective tissue. Cartilage, not exactly like the cartilage in your nose, but cartilage. And it makes them very rubbery. Now, they're not as strong, because when muscles pull on those rubbery bones, they don't have the same strength that we do as adults. But they bounce. So I don't suggest you try this with a baby and just kind of bounce it down the road, because that would kill it. But the point is, they do bounce. I'll never forget when my son, he was very little, and he was running around our tiled house, and he's running, and he tripped on something and he didn't even put out his hands. He just went, boom. And I literally sat in my chair and thought, well, he's dead. Not that I didn't care. I literally, as a parent, was just like, yeah, not going to happen. I mean, just, that's it. And you think I'd be distraught, but maybe I didn't really think he was, but I was just like, that's bad. That's bad. Like, if I ran down the hallway and didn't put out my hands and fell face down on my face, that's it. It's over. Anyway, he bounced for one thing. He went boom, 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 and he popped back up and he ran off. And he's been fine ever since. And it's because his bones aren't fully hardened yet. He's cartilaginous. Your bones start out as cartilage, and they get filled in with calcium and potassium and become harder over time, which is really a good thing. But when you're a baby, you want to be soft and squishy. You have to be birthed, and you have to be accident proof. And that's why it really works out good if you have those two qualities. Because Mother Nature is always trying to deal with a very difficult problem. And it's a problem that we're all trying to deal with too. Even in adulthood. Even emotionally, it's a problem we're trying to deal with. And that is the problem that I need to be rigid and flexible. And I need to be rigid and flexible at different times. So I need to be very rigid when I'm standing up here and carrying things around and doing stuff, but I also need to be very flexible to be able to pick up things and such. And so your body has done all sorts of very clever things to keep you lightweight, flexible, and rigid at the same time. And to be able to go back and forth between all those things. The ability to transition between soft and hard. In fact, one of the keys to the success of your bones is that they're really a mixture of concrete and rubber. So they actually have a little bit of flex and also a tremendous amount of strength. Okay. Your skeletal system, we said your integumentary system was hair, skin, and nails. Your skeletal system is bones and cartilage and joints and ligaments. That's what they chose to put in the skeletal system. And I don't just mean your book, I meant the medical industry in general. That's how they describe the skeletal system. So it's the bones and the associated soft tissue. So, what are ligaments? Who can tell me what ligaments are?
Yeah, it connects bone to bone.
Thank you. It's exactly what I wanted to hear, Mr. Blygen. Ligaments attach bone to bone. Here's a foot, by the way, and believe it or not, this plastic stuff here is meant to represent ligaments on here. Ligaments are soft tissue that are very, very hard and rubbery. I mean, they're strong. just like tendons, but they attach bone to bone. So we put those in the skeletal system because you have lots of ligaments tying your bones together to make sure my fingertips don't fall off and stuff. There's ligaments everywhere tying them together. Cartilage is often found between your bones to pad them so they don't hit into each other. Okay? Cool. That's why I'm just trying to explain to you why they throw in cartilage and ligaments into this discussion. And they throw ligaments in because even though they're soft tissue and they are not bone, their only job is to hold bone together, so we put them in the skeletal system. And cartilage because it's used as padding between bones. Things like your knee and your vertebra. Your vertebra, all this white stuff is cartilage that keeps my bones from smashing together as I run down the hallway. Okay? Cool. So, cool. Yes, Mr. Blige.
Is the cartilage in between the vertebra, is that what they call the disc, or is that something different?
Yes, it is what they call the disc.
Okay.
So the reason I hesitated for a second, it's 100% what they call a disc. Those discs are very special though because they've got a harder cartilage on the outside and a softer cartilage on the inside, so they've got a little springy to them. They're kind of like a tire filled with air in a way. They've got some jelly in the inside, but it is cartilage, yes. They are a cartilaginous joint. They're most definitely cartilage. They're just really special discs that also have some extra stuff in the center of them to give them some extra shock absorption, but they are cartilage. Yep. So, Mr. Bligen, what is the skeletal system made out
of? Bones, cartilages, joints, ligaments.
Cool.
Or bones and the associative parts.
I love it. Both. I love both those answers. Thanks, sir. Okay. I threw in some word meanings here for you because they show up in other areas. You will see arthro, which means joint, a lot in massage, and you will see itis a lot in massage. Not alone, but like arthritis is joint inflammation. That's what the word means. And in massage therapy, you will see itis at the end, in medical terminology, you'll see itis at the end of everything. Ligamentitis, inflammation of the ligaments. Tendinitis, inflammation of the tendons. Bursitis, inflammation of Bursi Sacs. It goes on and on and on. Yes, Miss Suriel.
I got a question. So you're talking about that the skeletal system is formed by joints, cartilage, bones, and ligaments. What about I just forgot the name. The ones that connect the bone to the muscle.
Tendons.
Tendons are not part of the skeletal?
They put them in with the muscular system.
Oh, okay.
But by the way, I mean, yeah, you're right. Everything's connected. And so this is kind of like why I gave you guys the big speech at the beginning of school where I said, hey, we're going to talk about systems of the body, but they're not really separate. Somebody came along and said, let's just talk about the bones. And then somebody else was like, well, should we throw ligaments in with that? Oh yeah, ligaments tie bone to bone. Yeah, we'll put it in that section. It's almost like they made up chapters about the body. And they just chose to keep tendons in with muscle, which makes a lot of sense. But yeah, that's why they're not in there.
Okay.
When we get to the muscular system, they'll be in there. Yeah. But by the way, Ms. Suriel, the tissue between ligaments and tendons is basically identical. Yeah. It's really about the job they do that changes their name. So don't forget, everybody, especially itis. Itis, because you will have people come in all the time and they'll say blah, 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 itis. And you'll be like, that means you've got inflammation in that area. And it's just a helpful thing to know because there's 4,000 itises, so you don't really need to memorize them. You really don't. But knowing that term is really helpful. I mean, I can't tell you how many times somebody comes in and they go, blah, 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 ligamentitis right here. And I'm like, okay, so you got inflammation of a ligament in your elbow. Okay. Like it's nice to know. And I don't have to know all this real fancy stuff to know it. So itis, inflammation. Osteo means bone. Peri means around, and periosteum means around the bone. And we are going to find out that periosteum is the fascia around your bones. Not only are bones made with fascia, it's filled in with calcium and phosphorus, potassium, sorry, but also you have fascia around your bones for tendons and ligaments to hook into. And judging on your looks on your face, I think I better explain that a little bit more. So, let's take you over to the whiteboard here. Blow me up for just a second. So, if we have this imaginary bone, like this, I eventually have to attach a muscle to this to pull on it to make the body move. There's muscles attached to every bone in your body for the purpose of moving those bones. The problem is, believe it or not, because the way the levers in your body work, the muscles are pulling on your bones much, much harder than what you're doing. So when I'm lifting 50 pounds, my muscles are pulling about 500. And so if I attach a muscle here to this spot, if this is my muscle, and this muscle starts to pull, that is a tremendous amount of pressure right in this one area. Right? If I said, hey guys, we're going to climb up the side of this mountain, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw this big screw, it's a big screw, into the side of this rock here, and I'm going to hook a rope onto it, and we're all going to climb up. You might be a little bit worried. What would you be worried about? You'd be worried that the rock's going to give way right there at that screw. It's an awful lot of pressure on that screw, right? But what if I said, I'm going to cover the entire rock with this sticky network, and I'm going to weave the rope into that rock? Well, that's what they did. Periosteum is, it actually doesn't go up there, but periosteum is this fascia across over the whole bone, and in reality, the tendon actually weaves into it. Now, when you're pulling on that bone, it's not a screw in the side of a mountain, it's a web, like a Spider-Man web on the side of a mountain. And so all that pressure isn't living on that one little spot that could pop out. It's woven into that. So once again, fascia is one of the reasons that you don't break into pieces all the time. Because the pressures on your body are actually unbelievable. The pressures on your body are unbelievable. And fascia is one of the ways we deal with that. Well, periosteum is the fascia around the bone. Periosteum is the fascia around the bone. Periosteum is the fascia around the bone. Either Mr. Tapscott has a mental tick or he thinks periosteum is a very important thing to remember about being the fascia around the bone. Cool. Thanks, everybody. All right, moving right along. So here's some cool stuff. Cool stuff. So I'm at school right now, and I'm in a building, and they built the building, and they put these steel girders up to hold up the building, right? And they're strong, and they're amazing, and the roof's not coming down. They're doing a pretty good job. But you know what? Pound for pound, they're not as strong as my bones. And the steel girders don't change depending on the wind here and the stresses on the building, or if we build an addition or something, they don't get thicker in one area and thin in another area. No. And we don't use them to move around. They're bolted in place. Right? And they don't produce life-giving blood inside them. What? Yeah. My bones are not only stronger than steel pound for pound, they not only remodel and change based on the stresses I put on them so they can better serve me, but inside they produce red and white blood cells too. For my circulatory system that we haven't gotten to yet, that they decided to put separate from the skeletal system so that we can understand the human body. So, Homeotopoesis, which you will not say often as a massage therapist. Obviously, I don't say it very often, but it's red blood cell production. And it happens inside your bones because your long bones, which tend to be like the bones of your legs and arms, are essentially, not completely, essentially hollow inside. They still have a lattice network inside, a connective tissue network. And they produce red blood cells, which is why you're able to breathe right now and get that oxygen to other parts of your body. And they produce white blood cells, which is why I'm able to lick my finger right now and not die, because the white blood cells in my body will take all those germs that I just ingested, and it tasted like a lot of them, and it will kill them. So they're amazing. And by the way, your bones also do other things like store some fat storage and things like that inside them. If anybody's ever eaten bone marrow, it's a delicacy in some places. It's very rich and fatty, and it's the stuff inside your bones. And your bones also store minerals. So when you need calcium, if you don't have enough calcium, and you actually need it, because we need calcium, by the way, believe it or not, for proper muscle functioning and things like that. It has a lot to do with our neurotransmitters, which we haven't gotten to yet. But if you need calcium in your body will be like, well, we've got a huge calcium bank here. Huge calcium bank here. We will take it from the bones if it needs to. So they do all these things for you. They support you. That's obvious. They protect you like your rib cage. They allow movement, which we really care about because of all the muscles that attach to them. And they produce red and white blood cells. They've even got some fat storage and some mineral storage. Pretty awesome. And this is one of the cool things about the human body, is very few things in your body only do one thing. They all wear several hats, and they all interrelate to other things. This means, by the way, that since there are blood cells being produced inside your bones, that your bones are living, and that blood has to get in and out of them, which it does. You have veins, arteries, and nerves that get in and outside of your bones through special channels that we'll talk about, and they get those red and white blood cells in and out of your bones. And they also feed the bone cells the blood that they produce so that they can keep your bones alive, because your bones are alive and dynamic. Alive and dynamic. I already said this, bone is connective tissue. It really is a matrix. When you break a bone, the first thing that grows back is the fascia, the matrix. And then it fills in. With calcium and potassium to make it stronger. Then the concrete gets filled in afterwards. We will not go into gory detail about this because it's not really, the words aren't important, the concept is important. What they're showing you here is channels that allow blood to get in and out of your bones. Because if it didn't get in and out of your bones wouldn't be alive, and they wouldn't be able to produce red and white blood cells and get them out of your bones. So, basically all bone, although long bones are a better example of this, basically all bone has a hard exterior surface and then a spongy, lighter inside surface, which is just saving weight for it. The hard outside surface is very hard. The spongy lattice inside surface leaves room for blood cells to be produced. It leaves room for blood to get in there and feed the bone. It leaves room for something called osteoclasts and osteoblasts that we'll talk about in just a minute to come in there and tear down bone and remodel it and all that kind of stuff. But the spongy material also saves weight because you remember, Mother Nature's got to deal with something very tricky with you. It's got to keep you light and strong and flexible. And this is one of the ways it does it with your bones. Your bones are actually pretty light for what they do. Okay, so let's talk about, I keep making this big deal that your bones change based on stress, and they do. So it's actually one of the big problems they have when they send astronauts up to space. So if they're up in the space station for a year or whatever, they lose a lot of bone density. And they attempt to have them work out there. They attempt to kind of put they can't put weights on them because it's a weightless atmosphere, but they attempt to put straps on them and pull them down to the ship, right? And have them exercise to put weight bearing on their bones, but it doesn't work that well because we all have weight bearing on us all the time. Even those of you sitting in your chair right now are weight bearing because gravity is pulling on you. Anyway, your body's very intelligent, and if you're in a weightless environment, it starts to say, well, why do I need these bones so thick? And so with astronauts, their bones deteriorate actually very quickly. Within a year, they can lose 20% of their bone mass. That's massive. Anyway, usually most of that comes back when they come back, but something they have to be very careful of. And the reason that happens is your body checks for stress in your bones. And strangely enough, where it finds stress, it tears down the bone there and then rebuilds it stronger. So it looks for little stress fractures and little problems where there's tiny, tiny microscopic stuff you wouldn't know about, you wouldn't even be sore from, but it's like, wow, it had a little problem there. And then these osteoclasts, the last one there, they come by and they actually scrub away the bone there. They actually tear it down more, which you would think would be counterintuitive. But then they send out a signal to the osteoblasts, and they come along, blasts and building, BB, blasts and building, and they come along and they build that area up thicker. And your body does this all the time, unless there is no stress in that area. If there's no stress in that area, sometimes you tear it down and you don't rebuild it, because your body doesn't see a need to have a thicker bone there if you're not stressing it. It's one of the reasons they recommend that you don't just take calcium supplements without doing weight-bearing exercise. You can sit there on your couch and you can eat calcium till the cows come home, and it will not do you any good. You've got to do weight-bearing exercise because you have to tell your body that there's a need to absorb the calcium. Otherwise, it just goes, why would I need this? So if I'm doing weight-bearing exercise, I'm setting off these signals inside my bones that they're stressed out, and osteoclasts come along and they kind of clean out those areas that are kind of stressed out, and then osteoblasts come back and build them up thicker and use calcium to do that. It's one of the things they use to do that. And that's what your body does. It's kind of cool. I think it's cool. Yeah. Good stuff.
What about magnesium?
I don't know. I was about to give you some lame answer. I mean, I know it is important to the bone forming process, but I honestly don't know how and why. I know it's one of the things they recommend you take. They recommend you take calcium, magnesium, and a form of vitamin D, because vitamin D has something to do with telling your body to do calcium uptake. And so those things go very well together, but I don't know why, but maybe Miss Routson does because she raised her hand?
I thought, yeah, I could be wrong, but I just thought we took the magnesium so that we could absorb the calcium. Like
That's
they
what
work
I
as
heard.
a
Yeah.
catalyst.
I think
But I don't know.
I think you guys know more than I do. I really do.
They're synergists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said.
But it doesn't work one without the other.
Yeah.
You have to have them both. Maybe.
What?
I don't know enough. I'm asking.
And you have to have vitamin D, and you have to have the weight, and you have to have the weight-bearing exercise.
Hold your breath when you take the supplements.
On one hand, on one foot. Yeah. No, but anyway, you have to have the weight-bearing exercise too. By the way, you have you have magnesium and calcium most likely in your body, and vitamin D. This is when we take extra stuff, right? But the point is just taking it. It's kind of like eating extra food. It doesn't always help you. More is not more all the time. Yeah. You know, even like your car, putting more gas in your car, it might go further, but it's not going to get there faster. It can only run on what it can run on, right? And that's true of your body too. Once you have enough calcium and magnesium and vitamin D, there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that going above whatever your body needs is going to really do much. But yeah, but I don't know the specific mechanism of magnesium, sorry. Quit asking hard questions, Miss Estes. Okay. Ossification I already told you guys about. It's when the cartilage in your body starts to harden. So when you are a baby inside your mom, when you are a fetus, you are all cartilage. You start out with no bone. And then your body starts to fill in the cartilage with more and more minerals. making your cartilage harder and harder. You start to make bone formation at that point. A lot of your bones are formed while you're inside your mother, but not all of them. And full bone formation does not finish, like I said, until 18 to 25 years of age, actually. Not full formation. We are not going to get into all that. So, yeah, Ms. McDowell, please. Ms. McDowell, were you going to say something?
Oh, my mouse just clicked the button.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't have anything to say.
Well, you looked like you're getting ready after I called on you, and I was just like, okay. And then, yeah. Anyway, all right, no. Okay, gotcha. Okay, let's talk about types of bones. Do not get caught up in this, everybody. It's not a big deal. You're not going to have to go around and name bones. It's just not going to happen. As a massage therapist, it's not like you have to look at somebody and be like, that's a long bone. The good news is classifications of bones are pretty much what they look like. Pretty much what they look like. So long bones are exactly what you might think they are. Long bones are the bones that you find in your legs and in your arms. These are long bones. They have shafts, they have ends, long bones. Exactly what you think of, right? Short bones tend to be short. By the way, just to let you guys know, these would be considered long bones too, because they're longer than they are wide. But these little guys, these are your carpals. There's actually 8 of them in here. Those would be considered short bones. They're often small and cube shaped. Flat bones, can anybody think of a flat bone? Maybe that we've learned about? Thank you. Oh, yes, Mr. Placencia, birthday boy.
The scapula?
Yes, sir. You've gotten a whole year smarter. Yep, awesome. Scapula, good one. And then you've got, they even threw a term in there, irregular bones, because you've got all sorts of weirdly shaped bones. And to be honest with you, some of your like pelvic bones and things like that fall into that category where they're not, I mean, some are flat, but some are not that flat. They're just irregular bones. The last one, the last one it's called a sesamoid bone. And sesamoid bones are kind of interesting to massage therapists. A sesamoid bone is a bone wrapped in tendon. And the best example is your kneecaps. You can all feel your kneecaps right now. You can reach right down there and you can feel that little kneecap. That bone is wrapped in tendon, and its job is to keep my femur from sliding out over my tibia. We don't think about this because we take our knees for granted. Another nice thing about gratitude. But if you think about it, when I squat down, my femur wants to keep going this way. It doesn't want to stay part of the knee. It wants to shoot out over the tibia. Especially if I put 300 pounds on my back and do a squat, right? It's going to want to shoot out over there. And you don't have to be a doctor to know that if your femur shoots out over your tibia, this is probably your last birthday. So it's all over. But what stops it? My patella. My patella is there. It's hooked to my tibia and my femur, and it stops my femur from going out over my tibia. And it's a sesamoid bone. They're wrapped in tendon and ligament. They're very, very strong, and you find them in high stress areas of the body. There's actually 10 in your body. These are the biggest ones, the ones in your knee. And they're called sesamoid bones, and we will mention them again, which is why they're underlined here. We will probably not talk about bone shapes again, because it's just not important. It's obvious. You can look at them and be like, that's a bone. You know, you don't need to name it. There are some names of bone parts that you'll need for your test today. I want to be honest with you again too. We probably won't spend a lot of time on them as massage therapists. You will need to know bone names, locations, be able to visualize them, know what muscles attach to them, what we've kind of been doing with the scapula, right? We really studied the scapula and we named all sorts of stuff about it. But knowing what's going on inside it is not as important to us. The shaft, however, of a bone is called the diaphysis, the shaft. Remember, it's wrapped with a dense fibrous sheet of fascia called the periosteum. I might have mentioned the periosteum earlier in this lecture 3 times in a row. And then inside the shaft is a cavity, a semi-empty spot. Medullary, I always say it wrong, medullary, sorry, thank you, there it is, medullary cavity. And it's the hollow space inside the shaft, especially in long bones, where red and yellow bone marrow is found, and essentially red bone marrow makes blood cells, and yellow bone marrow is fat storage. I just want you to remember that bones produce blood, red and white blood cells. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. The end of your long bones is called the epiphysis. And there is cartilage over the end of a bone called articular cartilage. And it's called that because it helps it to articulate with another bone. Let me give you an example. Remember our scapula that still has all the muscles and stuff on it? You don't actually want these 2 bones to rub together. You don't ever want that to happen. That is bad news bears. So over the end, the epiphysis of this bone, you have, and this one too, you've got what's called articular cartilage. It covers the ends of bones, so if they rub together, and by the way, it's a really beautiful cartilage. It's quite often, it's always white, quite often bluish cartilage that's super smooth. So it looks like a super smooth plastic. And so that if these guys actually hit, they'll actually rub up, the cartilage will rub on each other. Gives you a nice smooth rubbing surface. Your body tries to prevent that from even happening. But anyway, that cartilage, that articular cartilage, is called hyaline cartilage. And it's this bluish cartilage that you have over the ends of bones so that they don't rub bone on bone. You don't even really want your hyaline cartilage to rub that much, which is why, by the way, just so you guys know, your body puts a big balloon around this, a synovial membrane, a big sac around your joints, and it's full of synovial fluid. So the idea is this area is full of oil and it's under pressure that helps actually keep your joints apart so that they're moving around in this oil-filled environment and they're not actually rubbing on each other at all. Yes, okay, hands everywhere. Miss Suriel, yes.
I got a question. I've heard before about that synovial fluid, and a friend of mine that was a doctor a long time ago told me that when we press our fingers and make them pop, that synovial fluid is the one who moves from one side to another to make the sound. But he said, don't do that, because every time that fluid goes from one side to the other, a little bit of it goes out, and that's really bad for you. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you want me to comment what I think?
Yeah.
Okay. I disagree. I don't disagree because I'm super knowledgeable about this, but I've read a lot of studies about it because it's very interesting. So, I can't do it now. Popping your joints, if it doesn't hurt, does not seem to do any damage to them, and they're not sure it's actually the synovial fluid squeezing out. What they think is actually happening, I gotta get this the right way, but believe it or not, you have dissolved nitrogen gas in the synovial fluid and it's under pressure, and when they stretch a little bit, it pulls gas out of the fluid. It's kind of hard to explain, but kind of like when you pop open a can of Coke and the bubbles come out. Well, the bubbles come out and make a little popping noise inside your joint. And there's even some evidence, you know, mothers everywhere are going, I can't believe this because I've been telling my kid not to pop their knuckles for 20 years. But
I'm the same.
yeah, everybody. Me too, by the way. It sounds bad. It just sounds like something and people are like, that's bad for you. You're like, of course it's bad. It looks bad. Anyway, Actually, the evidence suggests it's not bad at all. Doesn't lead to arthritis, and it might even be good for your joints. It actually kind of massages the area in there, and the popping apparently is not a problem. But it does have to do with synovial fluid, but it's not because it's leaking out or whatever. It's gas bubbles that are kind of trapped in there, and they're popping into existence for a second. They're going, and that's the popping we hear. And so basically, no. Everything I've read, and they've done some long-term studies of people who were knuckle crackers to see, like, did they get arthritis? No. If anything, it actually might be a good thing. I always feel weird saying that because it's like, yeah, you should drink and smoke. But popping your knuckles apparently is yeah, not a big deal. Miss Walker, T.
So I was wondering, the articular cartilage covers the end of the bone.
Yeah,
And
hyaline cartilage.
is that the same as, I believe it was yesterday you were telling us how, like, when your shoulder joint pops out and it can kind of tear a piece of cartilage, that cartilage doesn't really regrow. So when someone is like bone on bone in their knee, is that like that articular cartilage has kind of just been chipped away?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the full details, but yes, the concept, for one thing, you really wonder if it's really bone on bone. But the idea is, yes, for whatever reason, they've had problems inside the joint. The hyaline cartilage has been rubbing against the other hyaline cartilage, and it has decayed to the point where it's worn down through, and bone is starting to touch on bone, or even bone just on the other side of the hyaline cartilage, right? It only takes one side kind of worn down. And that takes a lot of wear and tear over time. It's also, by the way, stuff like that isn't always just because something's worn on something else the whole time, but oftentimes that's because there could be other problems, and so the cartilage is not rebuilding itself well. Maybe it's not getting good blood flow. We see this a lot in overuse injuries, where somebody is just using that area all the time and not letting it rest, and the hyaline cartilage does repair itself, but it's very slow to do so. And if you run 7 days a week, and you do that for 20 years, your knees have a hard time catching up after a while, for example, things like that. But anyway, that is bone on bone. Yes, they are saying the hyaline cartilage has worn away and the bone is rubbing on the other bone. Yeah.
If you're having, is it kind of the same if you're having that knee pain? So you're talking about overuse, but if you're having, you have knee pain, but then you're not using it, it would make it not heal and repair as fast either, right?
So wait. So if you have knee pain, but you're not using your knee, then what?
Like if you keep it stationary, it would not really encourage good, regrowth either,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah, basically you're right. Now, again, I'm not an expert on, like, particularly on knees, but you have pointed out a really valuable fact about human beings and about the way our bodies repair. Especially when it's an overuse injury, you've got to give it time to rest, but you can't stop using it. It does not do well with either one. If you don't use your knees at all, your body doesn't see any reason to repair the cartilage at all. If you use them too much, your body never gets a chance to repair. So yes, you're absolutely right. That's a good time to switch to, like, we're going to walk 3 times a week or something, something like that, because you're absolutely right. Your body needs to be pushed out of its comfort zone to get better, and it also needs rest. It's kind of the theme of today, right? Some of you said, hey, pushing myself out of my comfort zone, but I also need to kind of come back home and rest too. That is very true. So you're absolutely right. You usually don't want to not use stuff that's not working well.
It's that balance of rigid and flexible.
Thank you,
That
Miss
you
Estes.
just,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, to repair it,
Yeah.
to build it and nurture it, and then like let it rest.
Yeah. And not to get all, but you're kind of going down this route, and I really appreciate it. And we kind of do that with ourselves emotionally too. Like, how much should I push myself in this situation, and how much should I nurture myself? Right? You need to do both. And it's really hard to decide how much. Like, I don't want to push myself so hard I get triggered. I also don't want to nurture myself so much that I just sit around the house and watch Netflix. I've got to figure out some middle ground there. Yeah. Anyway, good stuff. Yeah. We won't talk about the epiphyseal plate, everybody. I mean, I'm talking about it right now, but it's the last time I'll ever talk about it. It's really cool. But in general, your bones tend to grow from the ends. So they have these plates here that actually is where your bone expands as you're getting taller, as you're growing into adulthood. And then by age of 25, it seals completely. And it becomes the epiphyseal line. The epiphyseal plate is where your bones grow from when they lengthen. And it becomes the epiphyseal line when it just stops. It's just a term. It's a good thing to know about because, by the way, somebody has a growth problem, sometimes they'll say there's a problem with their epiphyseal plate. But yes, Ms. McDowell.
I know that we're not going to talk about this again, the epiphyseal plate, is that present in like vertebra too? So, because I know that the vertebrae isn't the same size for a baby as it is an adult. Do you know like anything about that?
I love that we've known each other long enough. You're like, do you know anything about? I do not. I know for a fact that vertebrae grow. I always think of. I know for a fact that epiphyseal plates and epiphyseal lines are found in long bones. I'm not sure how irregular and short bones grow, and I would suspect they would need to more grow in all dimensions. So I would guess they wouldn't have an epiphyseal line. But the key word there is I would guess. I don't know. This is yet another thing. You should just start a notebook of things and then research them and get back to me. But yeah, you're right. Vertebrae grow a lot in all directions from a child to an adult. And I'm not aware of epiphyseal lines except in long bones. So I would guess they're just growing out in all directions. Which is why I don't, I'm not, by the way, trying to make excuses, but it's why I don't worry about it so much. The fact is bones grow. All of them. Yeah. Okay. So cute. All right. I already talked to you guys about the axial skeletal system, right? Yep. Miss Lobitz, what's the axial skeletal system?
The main part with the skull, sternum, ribs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much this, except there's no ribs here, huh? Ribs around it too, yeah. It is the core of your body. It's the axis that everything else works around. Yeah. Yeah. And then Mr. Brown, what's the appendicular skeletal system?
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
What's the appendicular skeletal system, sir? It's in the slide, by the way. Just so you guys know, I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm trying to just...
I haven't been able to see the slide. Has it been up this entire time?
Yes, sir. I hope so. Yes. Can you see it now?
Nope, I still can't see the slide.
Okay.
Okay, the appendic is the shoulder and pelvic girdles?
Yes.
Girdles?
Say, and also read upper and lower extremities.
Oh, and upper and lower extremities.
Yes. Anyway, so yeah, it's your arms and legs attaching onto this, essentially. And your shoulder and pelvic girdles, which we've been talking about. That's really part of your arms and legs. Cool. Thank you, sir. So this is a good picture of the blue axial skeletal system and the, I don't know what you call that, beigey yellow appendicular skeletal system. And by the way, guys, I don't even care about those terms, except that we use them a lot in massage because we really talk a lot about stresses between the axial skeletal system and the appendicular skeletal system. In fact, there are really only 4 joints, 2 on top and 2 on the bottom, that are the same joints that attach the axial skeletal system to the appendicular skeletal system. What is the joint on top, one on each side, that attaches the appendicular skeletal system to my axial skeletal system?
The Sternoclavicular Joint?
Yep, that is the only joint that attaches my arms onto my body. The only joint. And all sorts of muscles we found out keep my arms on my body, but it's the sternoclavicular joint. Does anybody know the joint that attaches my sacrum to my hips? Which is my lower appendages to my... Please, that's right, Miss Estes. Please tell us. Tell us the name.
It's the sacroiliac joint. Something like that.
Pretty darn close. Sacroiliac joint.
Iliac.
Yep. Massage therapists will call it SI joint, just so you all know. And the only reason I don't want you to call it SI joint in this class is I want you to know it's a sacroiliac joint. But when you leave here, people will be like, yeah, SI joint. Remember that joint. That is the joint where the entire weight of the upper body, including the arms, has to get transferred to the lower body. It is a high stress area. If you don't believe me, ask Miss Estes. She will tell you it's a high stress area because it probably drives her crazy. And I have somebody in my other class that drives them crazy too. There's always somebody because it is a high stress area. Sacroiliac joint, the joint between the sacrum, between that blue and that yellow on the hips there. Sacroiliac joint. By the way, little teaser here, there's a bump back here. This is called the posterior superior iliac spine, and that's how you find the sacroiliac joint. This bump, which you guys have seen on people, they tend to be little dimples back there above their bottom, for lack of a better term. And if I take my hand right here and find this is easy to find, and pop it right over here, I'm in the sacroiliac joint. That's why I use this little bump. This bump is very important for finding the sacroiliac joint. It's very hard to find otherwise. And Miss Estes, that's where I put my elbow that day. Yes, and we remember. Yes.
The bone that you just showed us,
Yeah.
is that on the anterior or posterior side?
Thank you for asking, sir. It's posterior.
So, okay, yeah, you did say it was.
So, yeah.
So what?
So,
can you
by the
show it to
way,
me
sir,
again? And-
sir, this is the sacroiliac joint too, but this is anterior, and I'd have to literally reach through somebody's bladder and intestines, and you know, it would never happen. But this is it. But if I turn the body around, I can manipulate it a little bit through here.
So that's the posterior side, right?
Yep.
And then the sacrum is
It's,
in between that. Okay.
it's the
got it.
yellow, except for this. This yellow right here is the coccyx, but the sacrum is that yellow, basically an upside down triangle. It's kind of hard to see, but it is. And that is the connection between your hips and your axial skeletal system. So sacroiliac joint, don't forget everybody. Here's a good picture from the back, moving right along. Joints are usually referred to as articulations. Articulations, and that just means they articulate. And what does that mean? What does the word articulate mean? It means that they work together and usually work in opposition. So a door hinge articulates. Your hinges articulate. And so people often call them articulations, not just joints. Those words are used interchangeably. You know, and you might say right now, I'm articulating at my elbow. Right? I'm bending at my elbow. There's movement happening there. I'm articulating at my shoulder. Stuff is happening at my shoulder. Articulation. And I used to say every bone articulates with another except the hyoid bone, but as Miss McDowell pointed out to me a couple weeks ago, things like the sesamoid bone, like your kneecap, you could argue, don't articulate in a way with other bones, although later we'll see that the knee at least is part of an articulation. The hyoid is not. The hyoid, by the way, I'm sorry, I didn't explain. The hyoid is this little bone in your throat that we will get to much later. It is not your Adam's apple. Your Adam's apple is actually cartilage in your throat. It is above that, and it's a little horseshoe-shaped bone. It's very easily broken, actually. In all the murder mysteries, if they get strangled, they break the hyoid. It's very easy to break when you're strangling somebody. I mean, from what I hear, I haven't strangled a lot of people, so, which is good. Just keep it that way. Okay. There are 3 types of joints, and I'm not talking about like hinge joint and things like that, but truly 3 types of different cartilage holding things together and making them operate differently. We care mostly about synovial joints, which are my knuckles, my wrists, my elbow, my shoulder, like my hips, like most of the joints you're going to be dealing with, my knees, my toes, my ankles, those are all synovial joints, and all that means is they have a joint capsule around them, like a giant water balloon, that's made with really thick material, and it's full of synovial fluid. It's the thing that you're popping inside your knuckles there and things like that. And it is the most common movable type of joint, and synovial joints are what we're going to be dealing with all year. However, we do come across some other types of joints. Synovial joints, by the way, are also the most movable joints. They have the most movement in them. Cartilaginous joints move less. This is a good example of a cartilaginous joint. It's cartilage between my vertebrae. And cartilaginous joints move a lot less. So how can I bend my back way over like that if cartilaginous joints don't move that much? Nobody? It's Thursday. Anybody? No? Because I'm moving 24 joints. So, yeah, one of my cartilaginous joints doesn't move that much, but when you multiply this by 24, you get a curve. So, so it's true these guys don't bend very much, but when they all bend together, you get a lot of bend out of them. So cartilaginous joints, by the way, the good news is they are super strong, and you need your back joints to be super strong. But any one of your joints doesn't move that much in your back, but all 24 together can give you quite a bit of bend. Yes, Miss Walker?
So, does that mean when you do a back bend and gymnasts and stuff, their cartilage is also moving more?
Yeah.
So they're not able to stretch more, but their cartilage does too.
Yeah, so somebody who's hyperflexible, you mean?
Yes.
Hold on, I gotta silence Mr. Blige in here. I've got two. So yes, yeah. So that person probably has, by the way, more flexible muscles and all that kind of stuff too. But they're probably getting the maximum out of their cartilaginous joints. But still, that back bend. I mean, think about it. Look what my elbow can do. This is a synovial joint. One single joint can get me all the way from 180 to, all the way over here to 270 or something. Like, that's a lot. But my back is lucky if it can get that, but it uses 24 joints to get there. So yeah, they're maxing out their joints. Did that answer your question? Kinda? Yes? No?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, and the last kind of joint is fibrous joints. These basically don't move. And a good example of fibrous joints are up in your skull. So you've got fibrous joints up in your skull, and actually you guys know this, those of you who've had babies, like we don't touch the top of a kid's head and push into it, right, when it's a baby, because it's soft there. You're pushing into their brain. Yeah, what happens is the skull bones eventually do this, and then they're sewn together with a fibrous connection. Now, believe it or not, it does move a tiny bit, and you want it to, because if my head gets hit, I actually want it to give a little bit. Not enough to mush my brain, but we all know that completely solid things tend to snap, so there is a little bit of give. But that's a fibrous connection. They don't give very much at all. But they do have a little bit of give. They really do. And that's important later when we study heads and headaches and things like that, because pressure on this head can put a little stress on those fibrous connections and can possibly cause headaches. And so we do care. I'm just explaining there's no way could you possibly compare them to a cartilaginous joint, let alone a synovial joint. Yes, Ms. McDowell. And I'm listening. I'm going to grab something. Keep talking.
If someone has like an injury, like on their actual skull, would that wouldn't be considered like a joint if it like repairs? It's just like a scar, right? If like the bone grows back together from an injury.
It could be a scar. It depends. So you're saying the bone broke?
Well, for example, when I was a kid, I hit my head on the sink, and I had to have staples in my skull. So I have like a little ridge here, right in my hairline, but like they had to like staple it. Yeah. And I don't know if that was just like a skin injury or probably not a skull injury, but like if someone did like crack their skull, would it be like the fibrous like sutures?
I would guess, and I'm guessing a little bit. With your situation, by the way, they were stapling tissue back together. But they might have been stapling tissue back together because the skull was cracked underneath and they wanted to keep it all sealed and they knew the skull would heal. Like that's what they do. They're not going to go do much about it. But anyway, bone heals, usually fibrous connections come back. Then they get all filled in with calcium and it's back to bone. It's back to bone. So it's not like a scar, although sometimes your body builds up the bone extra thick in that area. And in that sense, it's like a bony scar, right? It's trying to make it extra strong. But no, it's bone. All right, so 3 types of joints: fibrous, barely move; cartilaginous, kind of move. Your back's loaded with them, but you can move your back a lot because you're using all 24. And synovial, which are these joints we've been talking about, which is 2 bones with hyaline cartilage over them, a big synovial membrane around there, synovial fluid on the inside, squirting oil out and keeping them all lubed up so they barely rub against each other, and you get these beautiful articulations. And synovial joints are things like your knuckles, wrists, elbows, shoulders, every joint we've studied so far, really. All that good stuff. Cool. Well, we might need to take a break, huh? It's been a while, huh? Yes. Okay. All right. I saw that, everybody. Just letting you soak in the synovial joint picture for a second before we move on. Okay. Remember when I said itis means inflammation, and I said you might have somebody come in and say they have tendinitis? You will have somebody come into you and say they have tendinitis. You'll have that happen all the time. You might have somebody come in and say they have ligamentitis, inflammation of the ligament. You'll also often hear people say, I've got bursitis. My bursitis is acting up. What is that? Well, it's inflammation of the Bursi Sac. So what is a Bursi Sac? Well, your body is very smart, and it realizes that in some joints, there are tendons running over the joint, and those tendons rub a lot. And so there are tiny little fluid-filled sacs that are underneath those tendons that help them slip over the bone so you don't rub on your bone. These fluid-like sacs look like tiny synovial joints. They just don't have bones inside them, and they're filled with synovial fluid, essentially, and they're meant to lubricate stuff sliding over some stuff. Well, if stuff slides over the Bursi Sac a lot, eventually you get bursitis, and that's what you'll hear about. But that's a Bursi Sac. You have them in areas like elbows and knees and things like that where tendons are sliding over stuff. And they're there to prevent that type of friction. Especially of a tendon going over. You'll also hear about synovial sheaths, which is literally an oily saran wrap going around the tendon so that it slides better. It's literally a sheath around the tendon so it slides better. Same concept. All of these are friction reducing devices in your body because we have to move a lot, but we can't actually rub a lot. And meniscus, the best example of meniscus is in your knee. These are pads of cartilage that help your knees fit together properly and not bang into one another. So your knees actually have hyaline cartilage over them, but they've got an extra pillow in between them just in case because of the amount of pounding they take, and that's your meniscus. So that's a joint that has an extra bit of padding in them. And we just want you kind of aware of all these things because we may come back and revisit them. We will talk about synovial joints a lot, synovial membranes, synovial fluid, bursi sacs, and occasionally meniscuses and synovial sheaths. Okay. Sorry, that's a lot to throw at you, but you're also going to read this in your book too, and I just wanted you to kind of hear kind of an overview of that. This is a picture of your shoulder joint, your glenohumeral joint. And you can see the bursi sac on top. And what is it letting slide over there? It's actually helping the supraspinatus muscle and the deltoid. One sliding under it, one sliding over it, and it's helping them move in that joint. And can that bursi sac get inflamed? Can you get bursitis in that joint? Yes, absolutely. So the glenohumeral joint can easily get tendinitis, bursitis, or ligamentitis all in that one joint. All those things are going on in that joint. Okay. We don't have to really talk about different types of joints. I know I told you about different types of joints like fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial, but they also, we've already talked about this before, they also talk about joints by the way they're designed, like a hinge joint. My elbow is a hinge joint. It can only open and close. It actually can't go like side to side. That's actually my shoulder doing that. Ball and socket joints tend to be able to go everywhere. Saddle joints, the best example is in your thumb. And a saddle joint is literally like one saddle over another. And what's cool about saddle joints is this saddle can move this way, and this one can move this way. So my thumb kind of operates like a ball and socket, but it's really because there's two saddles that allow it to move in two different ways. It's called a saddle joint. It's kind of a cool thing. And it allows your thumb to do all the incredible stuff your thumb can do. Because your thumb can do flexions, extensions, abductions, adductions, and oppositions. Almost like a ball and socket. We've already talked about ball and sockets. Sorry. You will hear crepitus. You will hear this word. I'm not sure, but you will hear it occasionally. Crepitus, we've talked about it. It is painless noise made while moving joints. I think I talked about it yesterday. If you don't feel pain and you hear noise in your joints, don't worry. Just enjoy it. It's just a little party favor going off. Pop. Cool? Crepitus is painless noise that your joints make. Everybody has crepitus. It's not a bad thing, and that's the term for it. And this releasing of nitrogen in bubbles is where we think the popping comes from when you're popping your knuckles. We think there's nitrogen actually absorbed in the synovial fluid. When you put pressure on them and kind of suction them, the nitrogen actually comes out of solution and makes a little popping noise before it gets reabsorbed. That's not important. It's just kind of trying to explain to you where popping comes from in some of the crepitus. I am not going to go into flexions and extensions and everything else because you guys have done all this. You will need to study again and you will be tested on it, I'm sure, but I'm not going to go into it. I am going to go into this. Okay, so here's the scoop. We've got 3 things coming up that are due. And what I'm going to do, let me try to explain this again. On Monday, you all need to present again. Yay, present, thanks Tab Scott. On the thing that you have assigned here. Again, just a couple of minutes. There's 21 of you, okay? Just a couple of minutes. No big deal, like what we did last time. I will go through all that. But Miss Jong, do you see up here? You have scoliosis. Look up here, scoliosis. You might want to write that down. Miss Walker Y, you have adhesive capsulitis. Walker T, you have Baker cysts. Miss Vincent, you have bursitis. Miss Routson, you have dislocations. Miss Trotter, you have subluxations. Mr. Tate, you have fractures. Miss Suriel, you have sprains. I'm sure the rest of you want to know what you have too. Miss Allure, you have ganglion cysts. I just love that, ganglion cysts. I picked that out especially for, no I didn't, by the way, this is almost completely randomized. Mr. Riedel, you've got gout. You don't actually have gout, well you might have gout, I don't know, but you're going to cover gout. Miss Sarno, you have something, look on the slide, you have something called kyphosis. You're going to talk to us about kyphosis. Mr. Placencia, with your 26 years of wisdom, you're going to talk to us about Lyme disease. Miss Munoz, osteoarthritis. Miss McDowell, you're young, but it's time to talk about rheumatoid arthritis. Osteoporosis, Miss Mares. Miss Lovitz, patellofemoral pain syndrome. What's that? I don't know. You're going to tell us on Monday. Miss Carodi, lordosis. You're going to tell us about lordosis. Yeah. None of these should take, we just want to understand what they are and if we can massage them. I'm talking 2 minutes for most of these. Spondylitis, Miss Hawks. Miss Estes, shin splints. Are you sad about the shin splints? Did you want something more? Anyway, shin splints are interesting because it depends on how you interpret what shin splints are. So I'm going to let you figure that out. One word of advice, Miss Estes, don't blow it. I'm kidding. Mr. Brown, you're going to review for us what synovial joints are. Mr. Blygen, you're going to be so kind as to tell us the 6 joint types. By this, I mean ball and socket, hinge, saddle, stuff like that. And Mr. Tapscott is going to tell us about temporal mandibular joint disorder. If he shows up on, yes, thank you. Temporal mandibular joint disorder. That's all due on Monday. So there's also a quiz, but trust me on this a little bit here. There's also a quiz that I'm releasing right now that I think is honestly just 10 questions. That's due on Monday too. Then there is a third item. So listen up. I did this because I thought it would be helpful. There's also a test on this chapter that is not due till Tuesday, but I'm releasing it today because I recognize that for some of you, the workload is huge. And I apologize. I care. I know you have lives. I really do. I have a life. Sometimes. Anyway, so the quiz is due. The quiz is a 10-question quiz. The quiz and this presentation is due Monday. But I've also released the test. I've actually never done this before. I don't know why. But I released the test that's due Tuesday because it's on the same chapter. And if you want to get it out of the way with over the weekend because you have more time, you can. If you want to wait till, Tuesday morning at 7:45 and do it in 15 minutes, God bless you. Good luck. But you can. But the point is, that way and I want to warn you, on Monday night, I could be assigning other things. I'm releasing this because it ties to this chapter, and I thought, let's let you get stuff out of the way with that makes sense to get out of the way with. But there will probably be something else due on Monday, not due on Monday, assigned on Monday, due on Tuesday, that sets us up for the next group of muscles. That was a lot. So let me recap. Due on Monday, short presentation on the thing you've been assigned and a 10-question quiz. Due on Tuesday, and released now, a 49-question test on this chapter. Done. On Monday, though, I expect that I will probably assign something else for Tuesday also, just be warned, that'll prepare you for the next section of whatever we're doing next. I think the next muscles that are coming up. But I'm not releasing those yet because we haven't talked about it. We're not there. I'm releasing this because we've talked about this chapter now. You have all the tools you need to take these tests if you want to. Does that make sense? Did everybody hear their assignments? Okay. Well, I'm still here if you didn't. We have 40 minutes right now for you to work on either the quiz, the test, or your presentation. So I'd work on the quiz and the presentation first. They're due first, but the point is you could work on any of those in our remaining 41 minutes that we have together. And I'm here to answer questions too. Cool? Kind of cool? At least clear? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.